What's happening? A good Thursday to all of you. Thanks for joining us as always. It is very much appreciated. The quarterback nightmare has come to an end, at least for now. We'll get to that in a minute. I also remind you, Phil Perry will be joining us in just a few minutes as well. Very excited to talk to Phil. First, though, let me remind you that we're going live starting on Monday, December 4th, every weekday right here on YouTube at 11 a.m. Eastern. Sharp, 11 a.m. right here live on YouTube, Monday through Friday. Nick Cattle Show. Give us that thumbs up. Every like counts. It matters. It means a lot. Give us that thumbs up. Like that announcement. Like our interview with Phil as we go through stuff here in New England with the senator. But give us that thumbs up, comment, and subscribe. Okay, so Bailey Zappe looks like he's going to be QB1. He'll be starting this weekend against the Chargers. He's getting the majority of the reps at QB1 this week. He's going to be at the podium today. So that tells us he is going to start this game against the Chargers unless he suffers an unfortunate injury. So the senseless quarterback shuffle that we discussed on yesterday's program is painfully over for now. And I say for now because I'm not sure how long this is going to last. If Zappe is a disaster, you move on to somebody else. We'll get to that somebody else in a minute. But this is the right move. Mac is broken. We've talked about it. He was not good last week against the Giants. I thought Zappe should have started that game last weekend. For whatever reason, Belichick stuck with Mac Jones. It looks like that was his last shot at keeping his job. He failed to do so. And this is, I think, out of necessity and not necessarily out of desire. Let's not forget that the Patriots, they got rid of Bailey Zappe at the beginning of this year. They did not like him enough to keep him on the roster. They decided to cut him, let him walk. He could have gone anywhere else. Let's also remember that even after Germany and what we saw, Belichick still did not want to start Zappe. So this is out of necessity and not desire. You've got a broken QB1. You get him off the field finally, and you go to the next guy in line. And with this quarterback room, that next guy in line is Zappe. The other part of what's happening at practice this week that I find interesting is that Malik Cunningham is getting quarterback reps as the number 2 guy, which I like. You know, people have asked me about Malik Cunningham, and I said, he's not going to play. He's not going to play quarterback. They're practicing with him as a wide receiver. They're developing him at that position. They also cut him a month and a half ago. I mean, if you're cutting a guy a month and a half ago, you don't necessarily believe that he's going to be an answer at quarterback, whether that's QB 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. But you bring him back. You're in desperation mode because this quarterback room is so bad. You start Zappe this weekend correctly against the Chargers. Chargers not good defensively. So you start Zappe, and you start giving some reps to Cunningham because you cut Will Grier late last week. So you weren't afraid of losing Grier either. So you're trying to make the best out of a terrible situation. You start Zappe, and you begin giving some reps to Cunningham at quarterback. So if you have to go to that young man, he's actually prepared and isn't getting thrown in the deep end. And you're saying, good luck. Good luck, Malik. That would not be fair to him. So I'm glad they're starting to give Malik Cunningham some legit actual quarterback reps at practice. So if he is called upon, he has at least a slight chance of surviving. Because when they threw him out there in Vegas, he looked like he was lost. The handful of snaps he played, he just looked like he was lost. So I'm okay with this plan, but we all have to acknowledge, recognize, and appreciate that this is out of desperation. Now, as far as Zappe goes, his history is that he is much better when he gets the full week of reps and starts a game versus when he's thrown into the middle of it. His yards per attempt are almost double. His touchdowns are up. His picks are down. His completion percentage is in a different world. So we'll see if Zappe, with the compliment of Malik Cunningham at practice, which is probably, a 20% compliment at the most. We'll see if Zappe getting these reps, if that's going to impact the way he plays. He's going to have a full week to prepare, which is fair to him. He's going to go to the podium today and speak to the media. The team is going to look at him as the starting quarterback going into this weekend. Thankfully, unlike last week, which was a bleep show, we've talked about it. And we'll see if that impacts Bailey's performance and he's improved. We'll see. I'm not, He's still a young guy. I don't believe he's a starting NFL quarterback. He was drafted as a backup quarterback. I think most of the league sees him as a backup quarterback at best, which is why he wasn't scooped up when he was released before this season. But I'm not going to write somebody off. It'd be a great story if Zappe ends up going on a run late this year, as far as they don't win many games. It'd be a great story individually. Wouldn't necessarily be great for the team if they rattle off, 4 or 5 wins here at the end of a season. And Zappe is in a decent spot, considering the circumstances. The offensive line still has some issues. The receivers still have some issues. Gesicki doesn't know what route to run. We all understand that. But as far as what Zappe can control, he's in a pretty good spot. He's going to get the reps this week, as we just talked about, and he's playing against a terrible Chargers defense. The run defense is bad. I think this should be a pretty big Stevenson and Ezekiel Elliott week. I thought that should have been the case last week. We went through that. Don't understand the first half play calling. But, against this Chargers defense, especially without Joey Bosa, one of their best players, there's going to be some opportunity there. Now, whether or not Bill O'Brien and Belichick decide to be aggressive with Zappe, that's another question that I have. Last week, we saw what happened. They weren't ultra aggressive with Mac in the first half. Zappe comes in the second half. They were way less aggressive with Zappe than they were with Mac Jones. So, how will they approach this game on Sunday? Will they give Zappe a chance of throwing the football down the field? He had like 3 throws last week that were beyond 5 yards or whatever it was, and he was 0 of 3, and one of them was a pick. So how aggressive will they be? Is this going to be a very vanilla offensive game plan, even against this bad defense? Will they run the football 55 times? Will they ask Zappe to throw down the field more than 10 yards, more than a handful of occasions? We'll have to see. And as far as Zappe's leash, I'm going to give him 3 weeks, unless he's an absolute disaster, puking on himself, throwing 5 interceptions. I'm going to give him 3 weeks. He's obviously starting this weekend. You've got the short week against Pittsburgh. You play on Thursday night, a week from tonight. So I don't think you want to go back to the quarterback shuffle when you have a short week. That would be a nightmare. That'd be a disaster. So I think Zappe gets this weekend. Zappe gets Thursday night football against Pittsburgh. And then you play Kansas City. And I don't think Belichick will start Cunningham or Mac Jones against Kansas City. Again, unless Zappe is just indescribably terrible, I don't think that's going to happen. So I think Zappe will get 3 weeks. We'll evaluate. We'll see how he looks, and we'll go from there. All right, let's get to our interview with Phil Perry from NBC Sports Boston. I have been waiting for a while to speak to Phil. He's one of my favorites in the Boston media. So let's get to it right now. Myself, Phil Perry, talking Patriots football. Here he is, the man, the myth, the legend. His name is Phil Perry, called the Senator in some places, NBC Sports Boston. Phil, just a pleasure, man, to catch up with you. I've always enjoyed your work, and it's great to talk to you for the first time in a few years. I think the last time I remember seeing you was in the studio of Zolak and Bertrand years ago. So it's good stuff to see you again, my man.
Yeah, it's been a while. Right back at you in terms of appreciating your work. So thanks for having me on here, man.
All right, let's get into the Patriots, this awful, awful team we're all suffering watching on Sundays. Let's talk about Bailey Zappe, Phil. So reasonable expectations for Zappe after getting the week, it seems, of the majority of the starter reps, and he's playing a Chargers defense on Sunday that hasn't been very good and is without Joey Bosa.
I would say reasonable expectations are that he can manage the thing. And it might be a thing, Nick, that looks like the Buffalo windstorm game plan.
Oof.
I really believe that that's what they should try to do if they're trying to win the game. Now, if they want to see what they have in Bailey Zappe, it should look much differently than that. It should look much differently than it looked just a week ago at MetLife against the Giants. That was not an NFL passing game, what the Patriots ran with Bailey Zappe. That was screens, that was look passes or now passes where you can see the corners 10 yards off the receiver. You get the snap, you immediately throw it out there because it's easy access. It's 5 or 6 yards. Behind the line of scrimmage, directly sideways, you can't live like that in the NFL. And you can't live like that even as a backup. And so if they want to find out if he's a true number 2, you have to give him a little bit more. And I'm not expecting this to be, Air Coryell sort of air it out type of passing attack against the Chargers. But can it be at least what they have done in recent weeks for Mac Jones. I mean, 2.3 yards down the field was Zappe's average depth of target on Sunday. That is a joke. Mac Jones, even though the offense he was running wasn't all that much more complicated,
Right.
it was still about double that. So give him a little bit more, see what he can do if you want to try to find out what you have, if you want to try to develop him, quote unquote, a little bit. But if you're just trying to win the game, I'm leaning on Ramondre Stevenson and Ezekiel Elliott.
How long's the leash, Phil, for Zappe, you think?
I think it's fairly long. I think what they might have ready for Malik Cunningham would be a package of plays. I would hope, Nick, just as somebody who wants to see something that might be a little bit more entertaining, I would hope it's more than what they gave him against the Raiders, which I believe was 3 offensive snaps.
Yeah.
And one of them, I think he started behind center, but ended up aligning way out wide as a receiver, and they ran at the goal line and punched it in, and he just stood there and did nothing. So give him a little bit more than that, but my guess is they have a package of plays ready to go for Malik Cunningham. Maybe he plays a half dozen snaps. Maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's less. But my guess is, and I've heard Scott Zolak talk about this, and he's been in Zappe's shoes before as a backup who's been waiting for an opportunity to start and get real reps.
Yep.
If you really want to find out what you have in him, give him the reps in practice, give him the reps in the game too. And unless it's a complete disaster, it's an utter meltdown, it's 5 picks in the first half, give him the majority of the work this week and maybe even next week. And if it's still a mess, then maybe you turn it over full time to Malik if you think he can do it.
Phil Perry with us here on the pod. Phil, Cam Newton, let's jump to this story about, Bill Belichick's future. We're all talking about it. You're talking about it. I'm talking about it. Karen's talking about it. So Cam says on his 4th and 1 YouTube series that knowing what he knows, Panthers owner David Tepper wants to land Bill Belichick as his next guy. How much sense do you think that would actually make for Bill, his point of view?
In my opinion, 0. Number 1, you're working for an owner who, he might give you the world in terms of salary and in terms of power over the organization, personnel decisions, head coaching decisions. That's all well and good. You ain't winning many games in Carolina next year.
No,
it might be a couple years before that's a pretty good team. And Bill Belichick's about to be 72 years old. So if I'm Bill, my priority is to go somewhere where I can win a significant number of games right away. And most teams that are looking for new head coaches don't offer you that opportunity. There might be a couple that do, though, this offseason. One of them is the team the Patriots are about to play with the Chargers. I'm looking at Buffalo if I'm Bill Belichick. And if Sean McDermott gets blown out of Buffalo because they are disappointing right now, and who knows how their season ends.
Would Kraft allow that, Phil? Would Kraft allow Belichick to go to Buffalo?
I'm not sure how much say Kraft is going to have in all this, Nick, because unless he wants Bill Belichick to coach the team again next year, I don't know what his leverage is. And I'm fairly confident he does not want Bill Belichick to coach the team next year as things stand right now. He is under contract, but you're going to hold on to him and tell him he can't be on the sidelines. You're going to hold on to him and tell him he can't control what is maybe the most important offseason of Robert Kraft's tenure as owner of the New England Patriots. You're going to cut off your nose to spite your face that way? Well, I don't want you going to Buffalo. So you can just run the show for one more year and use that top 5 draft pick and use the $100 million in cap space. And I don't even know if I want you coaching in 2025 and beyond, but just go ahead and do all that stuff for us now, Bill, because I can't stand the sight of you in Buffalo.
Could he force him to sit though? Could he say, obviously he would have to pay his salary, which is a hefty amount, but if things got to be that tough between the two, and Belichick's like, hey, I want to go to Buffalo. And Kraft says, I'm not letting you walk to a division rival. I saw what happened with the Jets and us. I'm not allowing that. Would Kraft, do you think, would Kraft at that point say, well, I'm going to sit you down. You could stay on contract. We'll keep you on retainer. You could become an advisor and I'll pay you for the next year and you can enjoy the suite.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Honestly, Nick, I don't know because I don't know the details of Bill Belichick's contract.
Right.
But if Robert Kraft takes away head coaching responsibility and takes away control of the 53, that to me, I would assume it would be a breach of contract. And then Bill Belichick not only has to be allowed to go somewhere else, but he also has to be paid. And so that's to me what makes the Chargers interesting, because anybody that looks at the Chargers and says, Dean Spanos is still the owner there, Perry, what are you talking about? Belichick going to the Chargers. He's never going to pay Bill Belichick. He wouldn't pay Sean Payton. He's not going to pay top of the market for a head coach. He might not have to. If Bill Belichick is fired here by the Patriots and the Patriots are on the hook for his salary in 2024, and our Tom Curran has reported that he is under contract for 2024, then the Spanos family, all they have to do is pay him something commensurate with the head coach's salary, and then the Krafts make up the difference. And I think there's part of Bill Belichick that would be tickled by that thought. Oh, I could go somewhere with a great quarterback and maybe win, who knows, double-digit games next year. I know it's a tough division with Patrick Mahomes, but maybe I could win 10 games right away with that guy. And the Krafts are paying the bulk of my salary to do it somewhere else. I don't know how Bill Belichick is going to want this to end here in New England, but based on what we know of him as maybe the world's greatest grudge holder, Nick, I think the idea of the Krafts paying him to go work somewhere else might be fairly enticing.
Yeah, Bill's been known to have a hair across his tuchus every once in a while. He's the Senator Phil Perry, Nick Cattle Show pod you're listening to or watching on YouTube. By the way, quickly, if you're watching on YouTube, if you don't like me, cool, that's fine. I get it. But everybody likes Phil. So give us that thumbs up. More thumbs means more eyeballs. That's how YouTube works. It is what it is. So click that like button if you enjoy me or Phil or both. All right, let's talk about the next guy, Phil. You have said, I've seen you really all over the place. You're a very popular man. That Gerod Mayo is likely going to be the next head coach. You feel that way. But can anything happen, Phil, over the final 6 games that could actually change that plan?
Sure. Now, could anything happen from a football perspective? That would surprise me. And it would surprise me if anything happened off the field that the Krafts would say, hey, Gerod, we feel like we should do it a different way maybe. I just think the relationship there is too strong. I mean, Robert Kraft and Gerod Mayo have been very close since Gerod's days as a player. And they've been very close even before he returned to coach for the team. And obviously since he's been coaching on the staff since 2019. So it's hard for me to envision a scenario, but in just the same way I have said when people have asked me, well, would the Krafts ever fire Bill Belichick in season? I've always said no, and I still feel that way, but I would never say 100% to anything because you never know what could happen. So if the Patriots defense, even if it falls off, Nick, I think they made a commitment. I know they made a commitment to Gerod Mayo last year in terms of ensuring that he would not go and take a head coaching interview in Carolina, and maybe good move by Gerod Mayo based on how things have gone for Frank Reich down there. And Robert Kraft's been very open about how he views Gerod Mayo long-term and that he is head coaching material. Now, can they guarantee him the spot? What gets communicated, what's in writing, what's not? That would all be very interesting to know. But I really, truly believe that he's the next guy, even though he's a Bill Belichick guy. I just think they see it, and I agree with this, in such a way that they understand Gerod Mayo is his own guy. And this would be different than having Josh McDaniels take over or Matt Patricia take over or any other of his longtime assistants. Gerod Mayo is going to handle things very differently. And I think it would be a mistake to assume that just because he played for Bill Belichick, he coached under Bill Belichick, and he hasn't really been anywhere else in pro football, that he shares a brain with Bill Belichick in terms of how an organization should be run, how a roster should be constructed. I think that would be a mistake. He's going to have a lot of his own ideas.
I've said this on the podcast. Not a big fan of the guilt by association. Just because somebody works with somebody doesn't mean they're going to be a carbon copy of that person. And I brought up on the pod, Phil, about a week or two ago, that why don't we look at this the other way? Why don't we look at this as Gerod Mayo is witnessing this bleep show, and he's keeping notes. Whether they're actual notes or mental notes, and he's saying, okay, I'm not going to do that because that worked out terribly. Okay, that's a fail. And maybe Gerod's actually learning from the last couple of years of what Bill has done wrong and will attack this completely different. With all of that said, if it is Mayo, if Belichick's out the door, how much of this staff comes back with Mayo?
It's a great question, because my guess is if Belichick goes, the other two Belichicks on the staff go with him.
Yeah.
That's a guess. Now, I would add this. Steve Belichick and Gerod Mayo are really close. They're very close in age, and they sort of have come up together in the coaching ranks. When Gerod Mayo was injured late in his career and Steve Belichick was just getting started as a coach, they would spend hours together watching film and talking ball. And they forged a really tight relationship in those hours, in those dark rooms. And, Steve Belichick's got a family here too. And say Bill Belichick goes to LA, is it a lock that Steve goes with his dad, or does he choose to stay and coach with his friend, Gerod Mayo? That would be really, really interesting just to see how that all shakes out. I think the defensive staff, again, maybe outside of the Belichicks, but I think the defensive staff for the most part would be safe. I think Gerod Mayo likes the way his defense has performed. I think he likes the way the rest of that staff has operated. And he has been, I think it's important to point out, he's essentially the defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
He doesn't call the plays. That's something Steve Belichick does, but he runs the meetings. It is very clear to me, based on what I've heard from a variety of different locations, that he is the leader of that defense on the coaching staff. So I think the coaching staff would be safe on the defensive side, and I think Bill O'Brien would be safe. And that might be just as much a Kraft family decision as it would be a Gerod Mayo decision. Again, another guy they committed to a year ago, and somebody who, even though a good chunk of the offense may be blown out, at least would provide some consistency on that side of the ball, which obviously they've been lacking the last several years. Somebody that's really respected by the Crafts, and I think they think he has plenty of ability there, even though the offense has been as abysmal as it's been. So I could envision a scenario, and this is what I would put my money on if I had to make a bet on it, Nick, is that Mayo's back as head coach. Bill O'Brien is back as offensive coordinator. A good chunk of the defensive staff is back. And that is a lot of consistency for a team that's 2-9 right now and trending toward the top 3 draft pick.
Is that what you would do?
I would keep Mayo because I think the Crafts think, and I agree with this. I think he has the potential to be excellent as a head coach based on the respect that he'll command from day one as a former player. That's another thing that he has going for him that other Belichick assistants have not over the years. And so he understands how to relate to these players, especially a different generation of player. I'm going to stick with Gerod Mayo if I'm Robert Kraft, and I would do that. As far as Bill O'Brien is concerned, I think he's been so hamstrung by the personnel. We're talking about all the screens and the sideways passes. Is that what he wants to do? Of course not. That's not how he wants to run an offense. But the personnel has let him down, and I think he's trying to coach around that. Would I love to have a Shanahan tree guy? Somebody who's a little bit younger, maybe a little bit more open to new ideas, somebody who's going to really leverage things like motion at the snap and unique cutting-edge sorts of formations, and is really going to be all in invested on getting next-level athletes to play the positions that you need to play in that scheme. Yes, I would. But I don't know if that guy's out there. If you're telling me you could get Ben Johnson and replace Bill O'Brien with Ben Johnson, I might try to do that, but he's going to be a head coach. Yeah. So I'm actually okay with the O'Brien Mayo led thing because I just think these guys are not Bill. And I think that's what you're looking for is change. And I think they would represent change. I think they've been good soldiers this year working under Bill, Nick. But I think once they're given a little bit more power, once that is sort of lifted off of everyone's shoulders, Bill's presence is just sort of lifted off of Gillette Stadium and the facilities there. I think you're going to see things change significantly because he does still have so much power there.
And with the Shanahan stuff, you do have to inevitably ask the question, how deep is that well? I mean, you've got Mike McDaniel, who took some of the staff down to Miami. And then you've got D'Amico Ryans, who took some of the staff, including Bobby Slowick. And now Slowick looks like a star with C.J. Stroud. That's a lot of turnover with the Shanahan staff. And, McVay's had his people thrown out there, the O'Connells and everything. I mean, there's so many guys in the league now that are running their own program from that initial program. When's it run dry? I think that's a question you've got to ask. Phil Perry with us, NBC Sports Boston. Don't forget to give us that thumbs up, like, comment, and subscribe. Subscriptions are great as well. Just 2 more for Phil, and I could sit here and talk for an hour with Phil, and I'm sure all of you would love that. But just 2 more for you, Phil. I want to kind of move to the front office and the personnel side now. I've heard you mention Adam Peters from San Francisco. I worked in Sacramento for a year and a half. I have a pretty good understanding of the San Francisco program. I know that, he was teetering on leaving or not last year, decided to stay. He's still there. If it's not Peters, could we see the Patriots actually bring someone back like a Thomas Dimitroff, who was not necessarily a yes man to Belichick when he was here in New England?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think it's really important to understand whenever this starts to happen and these wheels start turning, how does Robert Kraft want the hierarchy structured? Because if he wants Gerod Mayo to be his next head coach, is the guy who's running the roster going to be working for him? Or is Gerod Mayo going to have to be open to whoever gets brought in? Say it's Adam Peters, who in my opinion is going to be the number one new GM candidate on the market. Is he going to be told, hey, Gerod, you're our guy when it comes to the head coaching stuff, but this guy's really experienced. He's coming from a front office that's had a lot of success of late. He apparently, Nick, and you would probably know this better than me, but he apparently had a big say, and especially some of the later round draft picks that the Niners have hit on over the recent past. So are you telling Gerod Mayo, yes, you're our guy and you're replacing Bill Belichick, and those are big shoes to fill, but you're going to have to be okay with the players that are handed to you by general manager X?
Right.
I don't know. I honestly do not know how that's going to go. Now, I do think Gerod Mayo is going to be somebody who's open to collaboration, and he's somebody who I think one of his strengths is understanding that which he does not know. And so as somebody who has very little personnel experience, is he going to want to have say in terms of how the thing gets built? And would he have liked to have a say in terms of how the draft went this past year? Probably. But I also think he would be willing to take a step back to somebody like that, if that's who the Crafts end up going with. But that's important to me and will be important to them, I'm sure, is who is the boss? Who's got control of the 53? It's really interesting how it works in certain places like San Francisco, right? Kyle Shanahan's the head coach, but he controls the 53.
Yeah.
In Houston, you just referenced Houston, another interesting but different scenario there. Nick Caserio controls the 53, and D'Amico Ryans is the head coach. So can they work together? Can you figure out which blueprint do you want to attack? Is it the Houston blueprint? Is it San Francisco? Is it something different? Is it the New England blueprint and Gerod Mayo controls it all? That would surprise me. So Dimitroff, to me, would be interesting just because he's held that job before, and it would be hard for me to envision a scenario where he would be willing to come into a place and take orders from Gerod Mayo.
Yeah.
Right. The guy that was drafted while he was in the front office here, I believe.
Right.
So whether it's Dimitroff, Pioli, like any of these Belichick connected guys, even if they are, like you said, not necessarily yes men, or were not necessarily yes men to Bill, I think they would want to go in a little bit different direction. Now, does that mean they would say no to somebody like Elliot Wolf, Nick, who has a lot of front office experience, has been working here under Bill, but because he's been other places, I think has different ideas than Bill and would probably have a different approach to the draft, a different approach to free agency, maybe even a different approach to grading players, which I think probably needs an overhaul in a system where Cole Strange is deemed a first-round pick and Tyquan Thornton is deemed worthy of a trade up in the second round. Like, you got to get this grading system tweaked because it apparently isn't working out consistently enough. So I would be surprised to see a Patriots connected person unless it's a Wolf or somebody else who's been a variety of different places, and you could say he's not really Belichick tree guy. Even if he worked under Bill, he's got other ideas that are going to help us advance our roster.
It's a dangerous plan, my man, that you're laying out. I mean, if we got Mayo, who's going to be head coach, O'Brien coming back as OC, maybe Steve Belichick as defensive coordinator, Elliot Wolf in the same front office being promoted as the GM.
That would blow people away, wouldn't it?
They better get it right. That's all I'll say. All right, 30 seconds. I got one more for you. It's a draft question. I know you're a big draft guy. I love watching all your draft coverage when we get closer to that part of the year. If the Patriots are in the position to draft either Caleb Williams or Drake May, is there any way that they say no thank you and move to offensive tackle or wide receiver at the top of that draft?
Hard to say without knowing who's pulling the trigger on the draft pick, but
of course,
in my opinion, you can't say no to one of these quarterbacks at the top of the draft if one of them falls to you.
Totally agree.
You just aren't going to have that opportunity every year, especially in a draft class where it looks like there are 2 lottery tickets at that position at the top of the draft. So even if the rest of your team isn't suited right now to handle a rookie quarterback, even if the line sucks and the receiver room isn't great, you still go get the quarterback, and you hope you can fill in the pieces around that guy, because if you pass on the opportunity to get that face of the franchise, a true face of the franchise level talent at the most important position in the sport, you're going to be looking for a long, long time. So I would go Drake May over Caleb Williams in that scenario. The Caleb Williams stuff in terms of growing up, and I talked to Matt Castle on the Next Pats podcast about this, fellow USC guy, but even he would acknowledge these moments where he's crying in the stands or he's not meeting with the media after losing to UCLA. These aren't deal breakers, but they are moments that are indicative of the fact that he still has some growing up to do and that he's maybe not accustomed to not having success because they thought they were going after a national championship this year and it clearly didn't play out that way. I'm not sure I'm diving in headfirst on the opportunity to draft a player who's not accustomed to adversity because we just saw that.
Yeah.
And it didn't go great with Mac Jones. And so if Drake May, and I'm not saying Drake May is somebody who can handle it or Jaden Daniels is somebody who can handle it or anybody else that's considered a first round caliber quarterback in this year's class is prepared to enter into a bad situation, which it looks like this will be here in New England in 2024. But if we know it's been difficult for Caleb Williams and there's another similarly talented guy there who offers a similarly elevated ceiling, I might be willing to go with that other guy. So I would lean May over Williams, but I think you have to take one of the two if either one is there for you at the top of the draft and you're the Patriots.
Next, Pat's podcast, Patriots Talk podcast with Tom Curran, Zolak and Bertrand, NBC Sports Boston, on TV, writing, anchoring, doing whatever they ask him to do. He's also a senator in his spare time. The man is busy. So I have to say I appreciate Phil joining us today. Phil Perry, it's been great. I was before we came on, I was talking to Phil about his music career. And, I got a bongo in my closet. I was thinking maybe a bongo, Phil singing, fire pit, craft beer, but he's got 3 kids. I don't know how that's going to work out.
Hey, you shove a few maracas in their hands, Nick. They can hang. They can hang. Yeah, they might start bashing each other over the head with those things. But yeah, I like that scenario you just painted for us. I think a bongo and the voice of an angel together, I think we can make something beautiful happen. So let's figure that out. Let's get that on the books.
Love it. He's Phil Perry. I'm Nick Cattles. It's the Nick Cattle Show here on YouTube. Like, comment, and subscribe. Hopefully everybody enjoyed this. I will be back tomorrow without Phil, unfortunately. I'll be back solo. Until then, have a good night, and we'll talk then. It's the Nick Cattle Show.